And with the recording, feel free to share that with friends, relatives, other people that are interested as well. Happy to sort of educate people about NDIS because there's an enormous need from the participants side of things. And as we talk about it, obviously I'm coming from the investor's point of view, and if you look at NDIS from the NDIS provider's point of view, it's a completely different way of looking at the same subject, because they are typically interested in the best interests of the participants. And, without them, none of this is possible, because I'm certainly not going to be wiping people's backsides at 3 o'clock in the morning, or feeding them porridge or whatever else needs to be done. So very critical factor, and that's one reason for our success, because we've got some really good NDIS providers that we're dealing with on a regular basis, and can always do with more. So I'll just run through. Obviously, this is not financial advice, so we've got the typical disclaimer in Australia. But what we do have is mortgage brokers, and in 99% of cases, you have to use our mortgage brokers. It's not a normal residential loan. It's semi-commercial. There's probably only one, maybe two lenders that lend for NDIS. So to save all the heartache and missing out on the properties, for example, we did a Zoom call 2 weeks ago. We had 11 properties in Mildura, and they'd all sold by the next day. So you need to have your finance ready, jump on an opportunity. The week after, we had some NDIS houses giving over $250,000 a year in income. They were starting at $850,000. Now in the same suburb a week later, they're 870 something thousand. So there's a lot of reasons to be very quick and to hurry up with everything to do with NDIS, and that's one reason as well. Everybody's got their own accountant. A lot of your accountants are not familiar with NDIS, and some of them even said it's all too good to be true and have talked people out of it, which is just insane, because the accountant is not going to be paying their bills for the next 20 years, and is not going to pay for their vacations or get their kids through school for the next 20 or 30 years. So listening to your accountant is not always very smart. And also take into account, we might be adding a couple of $100,000 to your income each year. So you don't want that to all just disappear in tax straight away either. So because it's such an important factor in what we do, I'm actually happy to pay for you to have a chat to one of the accountants that we would use, that has been doing this for a couple of years with us, understands the theories, understands how to minimize the tax, and also how to maximize your asset protection to keep you safe with all your assets. We don't use conveyancers, we use lawyers. Conveyancer really just ticks the boxes, but the lawyers are making sure that the contracts are in your best interests and looking at what could possibly go wrong. And they're also experienced in NDIS. So by the time you get a normal conveyancer to read the things 15 times and understand what's going on, it's all too late. We've missed out on the land. They've charged you more money because it's a time-based service than just going to somebody that knows what they're doing in the first place. And depending on how old you are, we'd insist that you have a chat with a financial planner, because one of these properties can give you a couple of $100,000 a year tax-free for ever and ever and ever. So that's definitely worth considering as well. And all the properties that we show you can be bought in super. So keep that in mind. It requires some extra costs to get it into super. A bit of extra stamp duty, well, a lot of extra stamp duty, of course, and some extra finance fees, holding costs, all that sort of thing, but we can do that. And to buy anything in super that's NDIS, the NDIS housing starting at low 700s, you'd need about 35-40% of that in income. So you'd need about $300,000 in super to get one of these properties into your super fund. And that $700,000 property, by the time you got it into super, it'd be close to 800 by the time you paid the stamp duty twice. The income on that's around $150,000 a year. So most people don't really give a damn how much stamp duty or costs they're paying to get their super actually doing something useful as well. I'll go through a bit of a story on the NDIS, and the presentation stops me wandering off. Lawrence, you can stop me wandering off and telling other stories as well. Yep. Then we'll give you some proof about the income, because NDIS has always been, extremely lucrative. The government just did a 5-year review, which finished at the last financial year, and they've increased the rent from, in some cases, $20,000 a room to $70,000 a room. So we know that it's here to stay, and the government has dangled some huge carrots in front of us to get everybody investing because of the demand. It also stimulates the economy, etc., which we'll just run through and prove to you in a sec as well. The NDIS has been around a little while, not too long, considering that it only came into legislation in 2016. Then it took a couple of years for all the rules and regulations to be drafted and documented. Then, that's about 2018 when I started investing and getting involved in NDIS. And then the banks had to work out what the hell was an NDIS house, because a lot of them looked at it as a commercial property. Others thought it was just a normal 4-bedroom house in a street full of 4-bedroom houses. So getting finance was hit and miss in a lot of cases with NDIS, so it didn't really take off for investors. And people like Infinite Boholtz took their clients, their database out of investing in NDIS because it was just too hard to get finance. None of those problems exist for us because we've organised all that over the last 4 years or so, and I don't think we've had one person, well, we've not had one person whose finance was rejected or not allowed in going for NDIS, because the leases that we get for you from day one, the lenders that we use, the mortgage brokers that we use, run it as a commercial investment. So they're not really too fussed about you. They're more fussed about the lease and the location and the builder. And so we've been very successful with all that. So it's a lot easier to get a loan if you're buying a house for $900,000 that on a commercial basis is valued at $2.5 million, and there's $200,000 going into the bank each year. Very, very, very straightforward. So don't worry too much about the finance side of things. It's not like trying to buy, an investment property in Point Cook where, interest rates that they're calculating your repayments on a 9% and you're getting a 4 or 5% return out of the poor old tenant who's stressed out, as well. Very different side of things. Here, I'll run a little video and Lawrence will let me know if you can see it. Hang on.
Blank screen.
Really wants to progress the ideas of specialist disability.
All right, Lawrence, can you see the video now?
Yes. Can see it, can hear it, no problem.
All right, I'll just start it again.
My name's Sharon, and my interest in specialist disability accommodation is as a participant who really wants to progress the idea.
We run this just so you've got an idea of why this house costs twice as much as the 4-bedroom house next door to build.
ideas of specialist disability accommodation and how important it is to support a person's life with high-level complex needs and how that can actually make such a difference. And I really want to explore this more to actually then be able to showcase to other people what might work and how they can live and do things.
So we noticed that the house, all the walls have to be reinforced for hoists and joists and lifting people out of their wheelchair into the bath, out of the bath, into bed, etc. This is basically a hospital-grade bathroom.
That they never thought they could do.
We've basically started to talk to the market to be able to say, here is this new segment and it's disability housing. We need to be able to look at it differently to the way we construct today. It's not a rocket science.
We're noticing the giant bathroom. Again, you're noticing very wide hallway. There are no steps anywhere through this physical support house. You've got huge handles, huge light switches as well.
It is just good design. Once we sit down with the person, the occupational therapist, the care team, I get an understanding of what the house and home needs to look like. Part of the projects that I've also run is things as understanding what home for life means. So as people age, the need changes. So you try and make the design for future-proofing. I also find by
all the houses include technology. We build to a standard, and then if the individual participant needs anything extra, typically the NDIS pays for that. You know, like the automated blinds that you saw going up there.
Going and meeting the client and their families in their own home, it gives me an understanding of what is actually needed for the person that we're building this for.
Specialist disability accommodation.
So this is an entry-level improved livability apartment. It's got the lighting around so people with low vision can find their way around the house as well. Quite clever.
Is really important to me as central to the NDIS because it allows a person to have that chance to have a home, a space, be part of the community and celebrate what they really need to make that life come alive.
Alrighty, so that's an idea of what the houses look like and why we're paying that amount of money for them. Let's have a look. Flip back. So, Lawrence, can you now see a housing shortage?
Yes.
Alrighty. Presentation I put together 4 years ago. Haven't updated it. The updates that could be included, but you'll get the basic idea. And even if we use the old figures, it's still, there is no better investment probably anywhere in the world than NDIS, where the government's paying the rent, and you can also borrow, 90% of the investment as well. So when we first started this 4 years ago, we were terrified that first of all the government would just turn it off because it was a Labor Party election promise. When they got in to office in 2016, they actually implemented it. So we were, just thinking for the first few years before I got into it that, well, the Liberals are going to come in and they just cut everything anyway. So it's just going to get cut because it was expensive. But they actually increased it enormously. And then in the last election that went by, Labor said they're going to spend more money than the Liberals. And it just became a political football backwards and forwards. So we know that it's not getting turned off anytime soon. And at the 5-yearly review, if it was ever going to get turned off, cut down, pared back, or anything changes, it would have been at that 5-yearly review. So the main things that from the investors' point of view that we see from that, rent for some rooms went from $40,000 to $80,000. Other rooms went from 20,000 to 70,000. So they did the exact opposite of what we thought might happen. So now, more than ever, the phone's ringing, people are lining up for these properties because, the government's in it for a long haul. And we can explain why that is in a minute as well. So when they first started thinking about it, they thought 28,000 people might need accommodation. Before we even got to COVID, there were 122,000 that needed accommodation. Since COVID came along, there's even more because we had lots of people sitting in nursing homes, and in the nursing homes we had a whole lot of people dying from COVID. So the government moved everybody out of there that wasn't meant to be there. At the same time, we didn't have any tourism, so all those people ended up in empty hotels. But the government's trying to get them out of those hotels now and into properly custom-built housing. The waiting list is not going down at all. As a new person gets added to NDIS every 6 minutes, and there's many reasons why the list is increasing. So we can even get on the government website and have a look at what categories of people are increasing as well. And then, like I've already said, we always thought that the government was just going to turn it off, but they've only increased it as time has gone by, and the demand's got even more and more. So when people understand the mathematics of it, it all makes a lot of sense very quickly. So we can see a spreadsheet. Lauren?
Yeah, Joe, we can see the spreadsheet, yes, but your voice is breaking up a little bit.
Alrighty. Get a bit closer. So to Bill Shorten, it costs a minimum of $14,000 a week to keep somebody in hospital, up to $20,000 a week. So as investors, we're all excited that we might get $3,000 a week. Actually, it's not even 3,000. It's we're really only getting, if we were getting $90,000 a year, that's under $2,000 a week for that room. But the government's just saved anywhere from, $12,000 to $18,000 they've saved per week by having that person put into your room. And then the government's not paying the nurses, the carers, the food, the cost of the hospital, etc. That's farmed out into private enterprise. So keep in mind, $2,000 a week for your room. For you, it's a lot, because if you rented out a room normally, you might get $300, $400 a week if you're lucky. But here we are getting $2,000 a week in a 20-year lease. And obviously every house that we're building's got 2 bedrooms for participants in it these days. So it's a bargain from the government's point of view. But then, of course, if you think you've got to buy some land, so you've got to pay some stamp duty, you've got to pay GST on all the building materials that are used in that house, you've got to pay the plumber to come to work, and then the finance guy, and then the council workers all involved in getting that up. So average income in Australia these days is about $95,000. You've got to be paying at least $20,000 in tax. Then our NDIS provider can tell me how many jobs there are for every house that goes up. So if I've worked this out with one of our other NDIS providers, and very roughly high care people who are requiring 24-hour care, that's 3 8-hour shifts. If there's 2 of them in a house, that's 6 people required in the house during the day. Not even taking into account the doctors that come and go, the physiotherapists, the behavioural psychologists, and everybody else involved. Then, of course, you've got to and of course, nobody can work 7 days a week. So then there's another couple of people that are required. Then you've got to have somebody working at the NDIS provider to book their hospital appointments, book their doctors' visits, book their trips to the football, their trips to the beach, and everything else that gets done. So we could quite comfortably argue that there's 10 new jobs that are created every time we're building one of these houses. Not even include the building people. Then you're going to pay tax on the rent that comes in. So depending on, if you just put that in your own name and you have $200,000 a year coming in, you're going to lose up to half of that in tax. Less cost of interest and some deductions. So, the government's making some money there at least. And then, of course, you've got the NDIS providers. So some of them tell me they make 40% gross profit. Who knows? But they have to be making typically a couple $100,000 or more out of a house. So in the worst case scenario, government's got back nearly $400,000 worst case, and they've only given you, 150, let's say, in that example. So, if you could give somebody 150 and get more than twice that back straight away, it's a very good investment from the government's point of view. So look at it from that point of view as well, and that also explains why they're not turning it off anytime soon. Just follow the money. Bit of a video about what was happening sort of in the middle of COVID and how much money the government spent and how many thousands of staff they hired in Canberra to spend that money and move people into appropriate accommodation. So that was quite impressive. And as investors, we always used to try and work out what's the best area in Australia to be investing, because the vast majority of investors would be investing for capital growth. That's how we typically made most of our money. So when we started all this, we'd search by location factor. So the government has like a spreadsheet, because all the rents I've been talking about with you are a standard rent. It's a rent of 1.0, which is the standard rent. But if we went and built a house in Darwin, then we actually get 28% more than the standard rent, because there's such demand in that particular area, and the cost of building up there's a lot more expensive than, maybe in Werribee or somewhere like that. So to maximise our returns, we look at the area. That's how we started. These days, we don't really worry too much about that because the rents are enormous, so we don't need to squeeze out the last $2,000 or $3,000. And these days, we actually have NDIS providers that ring us and say, I need 6 houses in XYZ. And so we will always say, well, you give us a lease. And if it all adds up and stacks up with the rent that we get and the land that we can find, then we'll go and get you some investors for it. So a couple of reasons why this is completely different. We don't care about capital growth at all, because we're going to be making an enormous amount of capital growth in the first year or two. And if we just have a bit of a think about that, immediate capital growth, you can see that, Lawrence, the spreadsheet?
Yes.
Alrighty. So we went and bought a $900,000 house, for example. So that's not even the median price for a house in Melbourne, Sydney area. And that house is always going to get more than $170,000 a year. So once it's built, and it has to be built, and once some money's going into the bank account, if we went to a commercial lender and they said, oh, well, we're a bit scared about NDIS, we'll only give you a 10% cap rate, house values at $1.7 million. If it was Coles Myer had the lease, then the bank's not scared about Coles Myer taking a lease for 20 years. They'll give us a cap rate of 3%, because it's and an investor would be happy with a 3% return if Coles Myers were their tenant. So we've got commercial lenders that will give us a 7% cap rate in the Melbourne metro area or any metro area. and they'll give us an 8% cap rate in regional country areas. So 10% is just a silly conservative figure, but it also makes my maths easier. So once that's up and running, get refinanced, any of the big four banks, any commercial lender, even if they only gave you a 60% lend, which is another worst case scenario, you can redraw up to about $1 million, which would mean that you would get all your deposit that you've used up to pay that money, and you'd also get a bit extra. So you could go and buy another one next year. And this is another one of the differences with NDIS. And, in the best case scenario, if it's in a metro area, it's over $1.4 million. You've got another $500,000 plus whatever your deposit was. So you could come back and you could buy another 2 or 3 of these properties from us. And other customers in the process of doing that or have done it from the properties that have finished in the last year. Now, following year, we're not going to get another 100% increase in capital growth. All we're going to do, because a commercial property is valued on the income that it generates, and the income here goes up based on inflation. So we're just going to get an increase in the value of the property in line with inflation. So all our capital growth is pretty much made in the first year or so. So we know that every year our clients should be going and buying another property. So get all your deposit back, buy another 1 or 2 properties, get 12 months for them to get built, another couple of months for income to come in. So 18 months, 2 years down the track, you're overdue for another property from us, which is also another reason why we don't charge you money to organise all this for you, because we would expect next year you'll be coming back and buying another one. So that's our minimum income up there, $170,000. There are properties that are available with $250,000 of income. Just imagine something like that, based on the standard cap rate. It's worth $3.5 million. So if we were trying to buy a commercial property these days, we're lucky to get a 10% return. So even if we said we're only getting a 10% return out of that property, it's still worth $2.5 million. Worst case scenario, we've got $600,000 back in our pocket. Should keep most people happy for a little while. And Lawrence and me will be knocking on your door and saying time to buy another one, because Ferraris aren't cheap, that's for sure. Even school fees aren't cheap. I was having a look at school fees from where my kids went, and they're $85,000 a year these days. So if you want to send your kids to the best schools, you're going to have to buy some NDIS houses for most of us these days. Now we're back to the map. Lawrence?
Yes. Map is there.
All right. Gotcha.
Yep.
So like I said, once upon a time, we needed to work out where the capital growth is. Completely irrelevant with the way that we've organised the NDIS investment for you. Obviously, we were looking after ourselves, because next year you can come back and buy another property from us. But it's one of the only investments that I can think of where everybody in the chain wins. The participants win, NDIS providers win, the family of the person with disability, obviously us for, we're getting paid by the builder. Everything, it's just win all the way through. You don't feel guilty about ripping off some poor old tenant, trying to pay and cover your cost of interest these days. The participants that we have are immeasurably grateful for their brand new shiny house. Did any of you people see the Four Corners story about NDIS a week or so ago? Any at all?
Yeah, well, I did. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Lawrence and I had a good look. I sort of feel sorry for you NDIS providers because there was a few of them got roasted, but they don't have the accommodation. So where are they going to put these people? The poor participants are jammed in group houses where there's, I think in the examples there were 20 people in a house, something like that. And of course you're going to have clashes of personality and places like that. So us building houses where there's only 2 participants is to solve that problem. The Four Corners report also said there's some dodgy NDIS providers, but it also said that they've been kicked out of the system anyway. So, there's no way that the people can rip off the government for very long at all. So that's just irrelevant to us. All the NDIS providers get regularly audited, and if you think the government looks at it, if you rip somebody off, well, you go to jail. But if you rip off as a disabled person, they've got a special level of hate for you doing that sort of thing. So it doesn't really happen. It's not really a factor too much in the NDIS, and certainly not from the housing point of view as well. So that covers capital growth. Obviously, the cash flow is astronomical. And if you added it up, what you would normally get for a room in a house, we're getting about 9 times the rent of the average investment or similarly priced investment property as to what the government is paying us for NDIS. And, the answer to it's too good to be true is, well, it's obviously not, because this is in legislation. The price lists are there, how much the government's paying. I'm not making up how much rent you get. The NDIS provider has no say in how much rent you get. The SDA provider has nothing to do with it. It's all government legislation, and that's what gets paid to the person managing your property, which is the SDA. So the SDA provider is looking after the specialist disability accommodation, and the NDIS provider is looking after the people with the disability. There's links in this presentation that take us to the government websites where we can have a look at what the demand is in any particular area and work out whether that's a good place to invest or not. So we can take your old house, we can take your block of land that you bought and then your builder went broke and it never got built. We can take your grandma's house, now that she's in aged care, and we can look to see what the demand is in the area. We can look to see which NDIS providers operate in that area, and we can work out whether we should be building an NDIS house on there or not. And that might be the first thing for people to look at as well. There's no point having a 20, 30-year-old investment property that's worth $1 million that's, always needing maintenance and giving you $400, $500, $800 a week in rent, when you could be getting $5,000 a week in income. It's a big difference. Remember to ask us about that as well. You heard in that video about a home for life. And this is another reason why we need to hurry up as investors and get these things organised, because once a person moves into one of these houses, they basically do not move out at all. And they think of it as their home for life. As we saw from the Four Corners report, a lot of them are living in terrible conditions, but, it's better than hospital in some cases. Some cases it's not. It's definitely better for young people than an aged care facility, even though there are still hundreds of people being put into aged care because there's nowhere else for them to go. So they're not going to move out. But of course, once, the 30 people in one particular suburb that have funding for SDA accommodation are in their house, well, there's no point building any more houses in that area because we're not going to get 100% occupancy. So I'm working 7 days a week. And obviously at 8 o'clock at night, to make the most of this while the opportunity lasts. There are 4 basic categories of house that has to get built, or the categories as to what they are. And remember before I said some rooms went from $20,000 a year to 70. That was improved livability, because no investor was going to go and build a house that cost nearly the same as a high physical support house if they were only getting $20,000 a room, whereas if they built the high physical support house, they were getting about $45,000 a room. So multiply that by 3, it's a big difference. So rent for that room's gone up to $70,000 a room. That's about $75,000 for somebody that's in a wheelchair and can look after themselves. And then somebody that needs 24-hour care, they're depending on the area, they're getting over $80,000 a year for the houses that we build. So none of our investors care these days if they've got a couple of improved livability people in the house, or if they've got high physical support. It's not that much of a difference. And on top of that, we get a bit extra money as well. So robust are the people that might have behavioural problems. They might be crazy, they might be violent, but again, they might just be depressed. So living in Victoria, there's plenty of depressed people, live under Dictator Dan, where you weren't allowed to go and see your mum, you weren't allowed to go and play footy, you weren't allowed to play soccer, you weren't allowed to see your friends, you weren't allowed to go and see mum. You could go to Dan Murphy's anytime you like and, drink as much alcohol as you wanted. So there's a lot of people now that have depression issues. Obviously shouldn't laugh, but, being locked up with your husband or wife for 2 years on and off down here, sent a lot of people crazy. And those people, in a lot of cases, get better. And so the government spends a lot more money on people that can get better, and maybe somebody that has no chance of getting better. Not always the case, but there's a lot of money in robust. The NDIS providers may generate out of their plans, or that these people get paid to be looked after. So because none of our investors were building these houses, we actually went to an NDIS provider and said, we know that this is an area where there's thousands of people waiting for housing, but no investor's going to build a house for a crazy person, because we're only getting $40,000 a room, which was the same as a high physical support person. But here you can put 3 of these people in a house, and over here with robust, you're only ever going to put 1 crazy person in a house. You can't put 2 crazy people in a house. So, no investors were doing that. So we actually went to the NDIS provider and said, you've got to come up with a better deal. So it took months, but we've finally got a deal where we actually just split the profit that the house makes. So any of the houses that you see through that have got over a $250,000 income, that's a robust category house, where you would usually have 1 robust participant in the house and then maybe an improved livability or one of these other categories of people in the house. And what we do is we actually get a share of all the doctor's visits, the trips to the football, the psychiatrist visits as well, because the rent's not enough to entice a investor to spend the same amount of money as a high physical support property. And so because the NDIS provider is working for the best interest of the participant, not really that fussed on money as what us investors are. And so we have absolutely amazing deals on these sort of properties as well. And I'll give you some examples in a sec. So the problems with NDIS is it obviously costs more. We're building a house that these people cannot destroy at all. They can't burn it down. They can't kick a hole in the wall. They can't break the glass. They can't break the TV. So that costs money to make that house indestructible. And some of the houses we build in the regional areas, they're cyclone proof as well. So they're completely indestructible. And obviously you saw the high physical support houses, which have to have the reinforced walls, ceilings, roofs, etc. And that's why we can't go to a normal everyday lender. It takes a bit longer to get these things as well because they're very, very precise. The builders can't just go and send out a whole group of apprentices to get these things done. It needs to be perfect down to the millimetre as well. And then, of course, when we put this presentation together many years ago, I personally was just terrified of finding somebody to live in it. When I drove to all these areas where we've been investing, you go to Woolworths and the place is not full of anybody in a wheelchair. I'd be lucky to see one disabled person on the street. So just wondering where the demand was a worry, and it was a leap of faith that a few of our customers took 4 years ago. And we didn't even have leases for them in those days, but we knew where the demand was, and we'd talk to NDIS providers and we'd talk to their staff as well to make sure they had enough staff too. But these days, completely irrelevant because we're actually getting a lease on every one of the properties that we talk to you guys about. There's a lease already in place, and in most of those cases, there's a rental guarantee. So NDIS provider is not going to collaborate with an SDA provider and give us a $50,000 a year rental guarantee over 20 years, which is $1 million guarantee, unless they knew that they had participants waiting for these properties. So it's, once again, another reason why we think it's the safest investment that you can find anywhere in the world. You can challenge me on it as well. Keeping in mind, we buy a $900,000 house, we might need $150,000 to get it built. Deposit, stamp duties, paying some money while the house is getting built. But in our first year, 170 less the costs, we're getting that amount of money back. The capital growth, we've just doubled our money. So we've put in 150, we've got the cash flow, and then we've got the capital growth. We've got $1 million back in the first year. So plus we've got a 20-year lease. So tell me where there's a better investment. I'd be very interested to find out. I mentioned before, all the rents are dictated by the government. There's nothing, there's no he said, she said in any of this. So if we just have a look at one of the calculators, hang on. I've pulled up one of the calculators. Let's have a look.
Yep.
See it or not?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, you can already see it. All right.
Yep.
Let's get back to it.
Yep.
So can you see it now? SDA calculator.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, hang on. That's just the that is just the presentation. I'm just actually looking for the spreadsheet.
Would you like to ask if any of the Frank or iPhone have any questions to this point?
You can if you want. Does anybody have any questions at this stage? No. All right. Feel free. Sorry,
Anand here. Hi, how are you guys?
Good, thanks, Anand.
Yeah, my question was more around the robust, where was that a 40% share and so on? Did I miss that on at all, or did you mention about it? Sorry, I came in late, so.
Yeah, no, I didn't really get into any nitty gritty of that one.
Yeah.
At this stage. So, yeah.
Thank you, Anand, for coming on.
Yeah.
Right. Hi, Lawrence.
So if we have a look at one of these houses, the first thing that you notice, I assume you can see a picture of a house, Lawrence?
Yes.
All right. Looks like a normal everyday house, okay? And that's the whole point of getting people with disability integrated into the society rather than locking them all up in one particular area. We notice there's no steps, footpath on the house, cost of the house, and so the option there is 40% of the profit for the this house. Every one of these robust, and remember before, very often we actually do the dual standard, robust and high physical, because we may only be able to put one robust, fill the other room with one of the other categories. I'll just look for another document for a second, and that'll explain all the income that we get in the robust side of things. It's really important. Let's look. As this is an amazing deal that one of our business partners did with one of the biggest NDIS providers in Australia. And all this is documented. So there are leases that you can see on day one before you even pay any money, which is shown to the finance people. It's shown to, your lawyer if you want a second opinion, all that sort of thing. And list of services. Let's have a look. All right. So this is the answer. Can you see a purple page there, Lawrence?
Yes.
All right. So it says SDA care.
Yes.
Correct? All right.
Yes.
Now, every one of these robust houses has a bank account, and it's a profit share arrangement. So every piece of income and expense that's associated with that house goes in and out of this bank account. As the owner of the house, 100% owner, which also needs to be made clear, you don't own 40% of the house, you own 100% of the house. And, your contribution to that house is finding the deposit, making the mortgage repayments, and making that house available to participants. The NDIS provider, in this case Cocoon, their contribution to the partnership is all the services and the administration of that house. So every time one of the people in this house sees a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a dietitian, the doctors come and visit them, or they even get taken to the doctors and any of those other services, the NDIS provider voices the NDIS. So if we have a doctor's visit, then maybe, and I don't know exactly, and maybe iPhone can tell us, maybe they charge $300 to the NDIS for a doctor's visit. Now, the doctor is a member of staff of Cocoon, so even if they're paid $200 an hour, then there's a profit, all right? And when the government pays into that bank account, and when we pay the doctor's wages, they come out of that bank account for the services to that house.
Joe, speak closer to your speaker because you keep breaking up a little bit. If you can.
Good question.
So, Anand, remember this afternoon I mentioned this to you.
Yeah.
And that every one of these therapist things that you see will charge, example, maybe $100 an hour. However, they're contracted by Cocoon at a rate of maybe $50 an hour. So there's that $50 an hour profit. That profit then gets pulled into the house as a business entity. And then you get then once the expenses are taken care of, the profit, then you get 40% of that profit share.
That's right.
If that's an easy way to describe it, yes.
Yeah. And then the profit's distributed every 6 months. So some people don't want to wait 6 months. Well, they don't want to wait 18, 19, 20 months before income starts coming in. Because if we think we've got to have it built, so that's going to take 12 months. Every NDIS provider that we deal with, we give them 3 months worth of rent free, because it takes a month or so for somebody to get discharged from hospital, put into their house, all the other things that need to happen as well. And then maybe a second person go in after that as well. And then, of course, they've got to invoice the government based on the occupancy, and then they've got to wait for the government to pay another month later. So that first 3 months is pretty much a waste of time. These people will pay in February and in August. So if your house finishes in February, you've just spent a year getting it built. Then you've got to spend another 6 months waiting around for the money to hit your bank account. And it's only going to be 3 months worth of income, even though you've waited 6 months for it, because we've given them 3 months rent free. So you're going to need deeper pockets and a bit more access to funds to get this through, which is another reason why we get a huge slice of the profit, because it requires a lot greater investment of money from the investment to start reaping the higher income. So that may not be for everybody. And so that's why there'll be other options of the standard NDIS houses, like something like this one in Mildura, I assume you can see, where, just under $900,000, we're getting $170-something thousand a year in income, but that's going to start 3 months after the house is completed, and then you're going to get paid every month. Maybe every 3 months, depending on the provider. So there's pros and cons to each of these houses, and we'll run through the pros and cons of them all with you as well. And then, of course, if you think that we're in one of the regional areas there, we've got a lease for this place already. The build costs are always about the same. Maybe they're, in this case, just under $600,000, up to about $700,000. The land's really the greatest variable, but the rent's about the same. So if you're purely chasing returns, we're going to be building in a regional area, and you're not going to have much competition up there either. So very good place to be investing. Did that answer the question on the robust side of things?
Yes, Joe, thanks for that.
Yeah, pleasure. Now, we've also got all this documented too, because even if we've said that, a lot of times people think, well, it's still too good to be true. So we've got copies of the leases for you to have a look at. We've got copies of audited results from houses that already exist and are already running through this procedure as well. And before that, I was looking for one of the price calculators, which is an Excel spreadsheet. Let's have a look.
Can I just point out something on that calculator? Up here where it's got the Commonwealth and National Disability Insurance Agency, for any person, for any loss damage, it is their calculator. So this is a government provided calculator, and it's the government provided figures. We don't make anything up. This is all government provided. It's all government money. This is the beauty of it. As against going down and trying into the private rental market and trying to get rent, in these days it's difficult. People pay their rents in the first couple of months, and then they get short of money. So then every month after that, they're gradually getting behind the 8 ball. So
we can't get them out. Right, so I've had customers that haven't been able to get people out of their houses for 8 months so far. So that's awful, because everybody's suffering cost of living increases, but NDIS, we just don't care about interest rates. We don't care about cost of living. All that's just the past. Lawrence, you can see a purple line across the top of the spreadsheet. So anything purple, people, you realise it's from the government as well, and blah, blah, blah. It's all explained there. But when we're looking to do our calculations, there's just a drop-down box. So everything is in front of our eyes. You don't have to believe anything that I say, Lawrence says, Everything is documented here. These are the typical houses that we're building, and we were looking at houses in Darwin because one of the NDIS providers was basically crying to get more houses for the demand up in Darwin. And high physical support, we could be building for robust, and we always build with a breakout room. On-site overnight assistance, that's where the carer lives. We don't put fire extinguishers in the robust houses. We don't usually claim GST either. Darwin, we're actually getting over $100,000 per room, plus we get a little bit extra, about 11,000. Two robust people in there, we're getting over $200,000 a year. Now, usually you don't have two robust people in a house, so if we just had a look at something a bit more realistic, we've got high physical support house, and we're still getting about $123,000 a year out of a $950,000 house. So that's more than a 25% return. Amazing returns, absolutely brilliant. And there's a huge demand, comes with a lease, etc. So we can see that, and the government's going to pay that rent. So that's nothing to do with you. It's nothing to do with me. That's what you're going to get. It's in legislation. It increases every year based on inflation. We're also the only people that don't really give a shit about inflation either. People whinge about inflation. We're all sitting there at the 30th of June and going, geez, I hope we got really high inflation this year because our rent's going to go up. I've already mentioned $20,000 going to $70,000. The year before that, the rent went up about $10,000 a house for our customers. So that's a $200 a week increase in rent. You're just not going to get that, no matter what interest rates do for your normal everyday investment properties. We're happy to do the cash flow analysis for you. Once you know how much interest rate the bank's going to charge you, whether you're putting it in a company name, a personal name, a family trust, etc., then we can do the calculations, and we can do best case scenario, we can do worst case scenario too for the house. I've already mentioned a few times that every property that we've got comes with a lease on day one, and some of those leases have guaranteed income as well. All the properties with $250,000 or more of income have a rental guarantee of $48,000 a year. And it was just done a while ago to cover the cost of interest. These days, it probably doesn't cover the cost of interest, but it's been completely irrelevant because the houses they're not vacant anyway. The other standard everyday NDIS houses have rental guarantees of $1,000 a week. So that's still twice as much rent guaranteed as the typical investment property around that same dollar value. A lot of people think it's a bit like the Defence Force houses, but it's nothing like it. It's 2 or 3 times, well, it's more. It's 10 times more lucrative, taking into account their management fees. Then, we haven't asked you, much about your own goals, but I'd definitely like to touch on your goals and why you should be doing this. Usually, we don't really bother too much about, all the emotional side of things about investing. However, none of us are really, doing this because we just like playing Monopoly and we like beating our friends and having more houses than our friends. You're doing it for a reason. So why I started investing was because all my children got kicked out of primary school, so we had to put them into private school. And so my school fees went from nothing a year to over $45,000 a year, and that was 25 years ago. As I mentioned before, the school fees now for that school are $85,000 a year to have them board, which is what one of my brats did. So, you know, where the hell are people going to get that money? And I don't know any parent that wants their children in a Dan Andrews communist run, boys can be girls and all that sort of bullshit school. Putting them into a decent school with decent friends and families is just absolutely priceless. So I've had quite a few people that have invested because, unfortunately for them, they got smart kids, and they're going to need to be stimulated and to, you know, go to decent schools. So it gets parents off their backside. That's for sure. Then, of course, retirement. You know, as much as people love their work, they can't do it forever. Nobody wants a 90-year-old bus driver, and, you know, nobody's going to be wiping bums when they're 80 years old themselves. It's going to be vice versa. So we all need to prepare for retirement. And then, of course, if you think that you could replace most people's income with just one simple transaction in 1 year, then damn good reason to do it as well. And then we can see a beautiful beach house there, can we?
Yes.
Lawrence?
Yes.
Right. Now, this beautiful beach house is earning $171,000 a year. So I don't know anybody that would not like to live on a beach and not have to go to work every day in a very healthy environment up on wherever it was there on the Sunshine Coast as well. Gold Coast. All right. So I got that on the 26th of September. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, because what we've got is the house that we just showed you in Mildura. Let's have a look at that. That Mildura, it's already on the screen, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's already on the screen, sorry. That house in Mildura is giving us $171,000 a year in rent. So if I wanted to keep my imaginary wife happy and my kids, I'm not going to go and buy let's have a look at how much this house is worth.
$9.7 million.
$9.7 million beach house. Good old Joe is going to go and buy an $890,000 house in Mildura, take the $171,000 a year in rent, and go and pay somebody that's won this or spent $9.7 million on buying it to live in that house for as long as the next 20 years before I have to worry about anything as well. So, and instead of spending $9.7 million on one house, I can tell you I'd be a lot better off buying 10 NDIS houses and having $1.7 million of income coming in every year. So you have every opportunity to rent the lifestyle, you know, that you want now, or in a year from now, of course, when the income starts coming in, rather than, you know, getting tied down with one particular property as well. So you could rent that for $3,000 a week. Oh, and in Sydney, we did this a couple of weeks ago. There was a $6 million house overlooking the beach in Sydney. So I'm not too sure whether it was Manly or Bondi or somewhere around there. But the rent was $2,000 a week for a $6 million house. So, you know, there are $750,000 NDIS houses that are getting us over $3,000 a week. So go live in a $6 million house, have an extra $1,000 a week for whatever. This is what smart investors are doing. They're enjoying a lifestyle and somebody else is paying for it, which I assume makes perfect sense to all of us clever people. Alrighty.
Very good.
Yeah, so happy to email out the presentation, which has got all the links to all the proof in case you still don't believe us. So for questions, actually, let me just show you a couple of properties which we've already seen anyway. But today I'm looking for what's the best bargain, and something like this in Kilmore they've got a hospital in Kilmore, and that's what we're always trying to buy with NDIS, as close as possible to the hospital. So this is a great place to be. We're still getting the huge rent. We've still got this is actually a 30-year lease as well. And, you know, 840,000, it'd be difficult, you know, even to buy a new house in Clyde or Berwick or somewhere like that for that. So that would be on the top of my list, assuming that there was enough deposit there to get it through to completion. Then a little bit less deposit and enormous demand. 20-year lease with this one. The NDIS provider, it's a really good pick because we're already building 11 houses at the moment in Mildura. 2 weeks ago, we sold another 11 in one day, and the NDIS provider is harassing us to get another 22 houses built for the demand that they have up there. So that would also be really good. Mildura's got an enormous hospital, and people come from nearly hundreds of kilometres around to get into their medical facilities. That might be a little bit easier to get finance with in some people's cases as well. So that's also enormous opportunity too. So they're the sort of standouts at the moment, but there's quite a few different options. The only trouble with them is that they disappear in a day or two usually. So we need everybody to get their finance organised. So that's the assets and liabilities form that we send out. You need to understand by having a chat with an accountant as to whether you should be buying it in your own name, in which case you typically only need a 10% deposit plus stamp duty and some finance costs to get it through. Or if you buy it in your family trust to reduce your tax and increase your asset protection, you might need a 20% deposit and then the fees that go with that and the stamp duties as well. But there's differences there on how we're going to structure the finance too, and that's what we work out once we know your assets and liabilities. The accountants can actually make recommendations as to what's best for you at your stage of life, what your expenses are, why you're doing this, you know, where the money needs to go, etc. We're happy to get all that done for you as well. The questions?
Thank you, Joe.
Actually, I'll give you one more thing. There's so much to NDIS, and this is also one reason why the finance just goes through, because we're actually buying absolute bargains. We've been harassing builders for 4 years. We're buying these things in bulk. You know, you're not buying one house in, you know, out of nowhere west. All right. We're buying half a dozen at a time. So we've got economies of scale as well. The builder wants to deal with, you know, as many as possible in one go. And if you have a look at building a high physical support house, I assume you can see a purple spreadsheet here, guys. Lawrence?
Yes.
Right. Far column, high physical support. The government says that to build one of these 2-bedroom houses that you've been looking at, the building cost, all right, is over $1 million. It's nearly $1.1 million. Now, I've been showing you houses where the building cost it's not even $600,000. So that is a crazy bargain from an investor point of view. High physical support house, right? And what's better than that, it's actually a robust, indestructible house as well for under $600,000. Okay? So it's an amazing bargain. You know, the guys that put together that 5-yearly review for the NDIS, they're very smart people. If you have a look at their qualifications and who they were, very impressive. They're independent people. They're not all just bureaucrats. But the review, I think it's 101 pages, and it explains exactly how they've worked out these calculations and why they pay us as well. So valuations are no problem because that's just the build cost. That's you got to add the land to that as well. So if we can be building something for $600,000 to $700,000, that's $300,000, $400,000 less than what the government says it costs to build that property. So thank goodness we're not getting the government to build it. That's the first thing. But secondly, that just proves to you what amazing bargains that we've come up with by harassing builders, harassing NDIS providers. Because I work for you. I'm not working for the builder. I'm not working for SDA provider, finance company, anything like that. I'm trying to maximize your returns so that next year you can come back and do this again with us. And it's just a win-win-win all the way through. Anything else you want to add, Lawrence?
No, I think you've covered it pretty well, Joe.
All right. If anybody sleepless nights wondering how they're going to spend all this money, then obviously presents to me come Christmas time should be top of your list. And feel free to email me or call me or Lawrence anytime, and we can, answer those questions or get something reserved for you or get the process started. Alrighty?
Very good. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Anand, for coming on and the others.
No, appreciate it. Thank you.
Great.
No, appreciate it.
Can you share those examples, Joe? That would be great with those numbers. If it is not confidential, that would be great.
No, it's not confidential. Happy to share them around. Actually, I just see a whole lot of questions. I think that have come in. Is there? No, maybe they're old questions. All right, new ones. All right, under control, guys. Yeah, if you would just email me to remind me to send it to you, then I'll do it. So we should have that email, my email, which is joe@capitalinvestmentideas.com.au. Send it to me.
Send you an email, Joe and Anand, with your own details so you know what to do.
Yeah.
All right, done. All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. See you guys.